Father God, we thank you for Robert. We thank you for the time that he has spent putting this talk together for us this morning. May he know your peace as he speaks your words, Lord. And may we open our minds and our ears to hearing what he has to say and go away knowing more about you, Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning. Well, as Elizabeth said, I'm just a member of the congregation here, and I'm bringing you the Lord's Word this morning. If you've got a Bible, it might be useful to open it, not because I'm going to have a detailed Bible study on this, you'll be pleased to hear, but I will just be leaping around a little bit, so it might be helpful. Right, okay. Who watches the repair shop? Yep. There's another one of them. Now, the thing I really love about the repair shop is that not only do you see some treasured items being restored, and you can see there's a couple here, for example, with their playhouse having been restored, like a small theatre, and you can see joy on their face, but also it's the joy on the face of the people who have done the work. And I do admire the skill of the craftsmen and the craftswomen, and the pleasure that they give, and the pleasure they get by restoring a treasured item of somebody who's basically a stranger. And it's all about restoration. That's the theme of this morning's talk. So, first of all, Zephaniah. We don't hear much about Zephaniah, do we? It's not often coming up. It doesn't sort of tend to come up at this time of year normally. You could say, why have we got Zephaniah as an Advent reading? It's not the traditional one we have. Zephaniah was, as Barry said, was a minor prophet. Minor because he wrote a small book, not because he was a small man. We don't know how tall he was or short he was. It was about the same time as Jeremiah, Isaiah, that sort of era. And although it's only a small book, only 3 chapters long, and it's well worth a read, it won't take you long to read Zephaniah, it does actually pack quite a punch in what it does. It was written, as Barry said, about 600 years BC, 600 years before the coming of Christ. And the idea of Zephaniah is it gives a foretaste of what's to come. And in this, the reading that we had was a foretaste of God's desire to restore the broken relationship that he had with Israel, who were wandering away from the path. And it also gives a glimpse of eternal and final restoration when Jesus comes again. So what is the passage saying that we heard this morning? Well, I think we have to put it in the context of those who heard it at the time. For us now, 2,600 years later, we think, what's that all about? Which is fair enough for an awful lot of the Old Testament. But it meant an awful lot to the Judeans, the Israelites, at 600 BC, if they were prepared to listen to it. So we actually, to get behind this, we need to go into the history of the Israelites so we can understand the message. And although Zephaniah was written primarily for the Judeans, it does carry messages for us. So I've just got a simple timeline I produced here, just showing a part of the history of the Israelites. And I'm not going to go through masses of details here, but what we're going to think about is we probably all know King David. King David was a good king, a great king. He was the king who united the 12 tribes of Israel into one kingdom. After him came his son Solomon, who started off good and ended up perhaps not quite so good. Certainly he did really well to begin with. And then after Solomon, there were miscellaneous kings. And also after Solomon, the kingdom split. To the northern kingdom continued to be called Israel, and the southern kingdom called Judea. So they had northern kingdom and southern kingdom. Both kingdoms progressively turned away from the Lord. They rebelled against his teaching. They rebelled against what the prophets that the Lord sent said, and they suffered the consequences of rebelling against the Lord. The northern kingdom went into captivity 20-ish, that sort of time, BC. And the time when this prophecy was written, when the southern kingdom was a little bit later, about 80 years later, I've got Josiah there was the king reigning at the time. and it was shortly before they were going into captivity. You see, the kingdoms failed because of various reasons. One, the priests failed in their duties to uphold the proper daily sacrifices, which was the routine at that time, and to keep the temple a holy place. The kings were leading people astray. The kings who had been appointed and anointed to lead the people, in most cases, failed to lead the people. They didn't follow God's word that you should only worship me and not to worship other gods. And there were a few notable exceptions of good kings in the southern kingdom. In the northern kingdom, there were no good kings for all of their period before they were taken into captivities. Then we had the prophets. There were good prophets that the Lord appointed, and these are the ones that are recorded in the Bible. But at the same time, there were an awful lot of false prophets out there saying, oh, all is good. It's all good news. The Lord has saved us in the past. He will save us in the future. You can carry on sinning. Not singing, sinning. You can carry on worshipping false gods like Molech, gods where you sacrificed your son and daughter in the fire. These aren't nice gods they were worshipping. They were pretty horrible ones they were worshipping. But they wanted to do it. And the false prophets were saying, it's okay, carry on doing that. They were telling the people what they wanted to hear. So maybe there's a message for us just in that. Beware a church in which perhaps you feel too comfortable. Beware of a speaker who gives you a sermon that you find perhaps just a little bit too easy. That doesn't challenge you enough. Just a warning. And time after time, the Lord sent his prophets to speak the word of the Lord, to speak the truth to the people. And time after time, they were rejected by the people, rejected by the kings, rejected by the false prophets. He was giving them his word. It actually was pretty severe. If you don't follow me, you'll end up in the mire. You'll end up being away into captivity. You won't be able to live in your land anymore. If you do follow me, then all will be good. I will look after you. I will care for you. I will keep you free from enemy attack. It's a simple choice, A or you think A is obvious, isn't it? Go for A. Choose the Lord looking after you. But no, they chose B instead. And now they're finding the result of choosing the wrong option. The problem is the people, although they knew from their history that the Lord would rescue them. Just look, for example, time of Joseph, 12 sons, they went into Egypt to avoid suffering from famine in the land. Moses, who led them out of Egypt with all the miracles he performed. 40 years of wandering in the desert, with the Lord providing food and water for them, and their clothing as well. No clothes or shoes wore out at that time in the desert. He provided judges, leaders to care for them in the time after they had entered the promised land. He fought their battles for them, King David, to unite them into one kingdom, one nation. Time and time again, he rescued them from their own choices. And time again, they just slipped away back into the wrong style. So the people knew all that, and yet just carried on regardless. And so inevitably, there were poor leadership, there were few believers. And if that sounds familiar to you, think about the situation today. With some exceptions, national leaders don't recognize the Lord for who he is. And some even worship false gods. The church, I'm sorry to say, is not sending a clear message of the authority of Scripture. Forgive me here, Jeanette, and you can I can say this because perhaps I'm not you, but I think the Church of England is trying to be all things to all people and ends up not being very much to anybody. It's trying to spread itself too thin. The church has failed to uphold standards of behaviour. Think of all the child abuse scandals. These should never have happened in an organisation like the church. And of course, there are dark storms on our horizon. Think of just the world, what is happening now with wars around the place, famine, floods, the environment. Creation is slowly falling apart. And not surprisingly, there are fewer and fewer worshipping Christians. Here's a slide I extracted from, one is from the Church of England, showing the regular worshippers. That's weekly attendance, national, 854,000 in 2019, 654,000 in 2022. There has actually risen over the last 2 years because there was a big drop after COVID. So it has come back a bit from where it was. Or the UK Faith Survey in 2016, a little bit dated now. Weekly attendance, this was for all Christians, not just Church of England, so it includes Roman Catholics, free churches, Presbyterians, Baptists, etc. 6.5 million in 1980, dropped to 3 million in 2015. Well, another slide, which is perhaps even more damning, the census. 2011 census versus the 2021 census. Those who identify as a Christian is dropping. These are millions of people, 32 million dropping to 27 million. But look what's risen hugely. People who say they have no religion. It's almost doubled in the last 10 years. People who basically have no interest. And we have the other faiths as well. Also, interestingly, increasing. So the number of Christians is decreasing, the number of other faiths is increasing. So that's where we are. That's a bit of background. Now back to Zephaniah. Well, Zephaniah wrote this prophecy shortly before the southern kingdom, Judah, was overrun by the Babylonians and the Judeans taken into captivity. It was written during the reign of one of the better judges, one of the better kings, rather, of Judea, Josiah. He was a good king. He was a reforming king. He was seeking to bring the southern kingdom back into alignment with the will of the Lord. And yet this book was written at that time. And it was only a short book, Zephaniah, but if we just read out, for example, right at the beginning of chapter 1, it's proclaiming destruction as divine judgment for the sins of Judea, and particular judgment against the officials, the rulers, the priests, and the false prophets. I'll just read out a couple of verses from it. I will stretch out my hand against Judah and against all who live in Jerusalem. I will destroy every remnant of Baal worship in this place, the very names of the idolatrous priests, those who bow down on the roofs to worship the starry host, those who bow down and swear by the Lord, those who swear by Molech. He is not pulling any punches, is he, Zephaniah? He's calling about destruction. Or if we look in chapter 3, verses 3 to 4, he is saying, her officials within her are roaring lions, her rulers are evening wolves who leave nothing for the morning. Her prophets are unprincipled, they are treacherous people. Her priests profane the sanctuary and do violence to the Lord. See, the language that's used is pretty intense, isn't it? It describes the coming of the day of the Lord, and it's written with almost apocalyptic passion. And the language written demands Judeans to repent and to show humility. And this was written when Josiah was a reforming king. This is written in one of the better times of the kingdom, of the southern kingdom. And despite this, Zephaniah is not pulling any punches. He's challenging the complacent attitude of the Israelites, the Judeans at that time. He says in Zephaniah 1:12, at that time I will search Jerusalem with lamps and punish those who are complacent, who are like wine left on the dregs, who think the Lord will do nothing, either good or bad. See, they were a challenge for the Judeans as they showed up the hypocrisy and the indifference, but they're also a challenge for us. This language may sound harsh to our modern ears, certainly not ones that we would use when we're walking around, But have we too succumbed to indifference? Do we too perhaps worship other gods? Maybe not gods carved out of wood or of stone, but gods maybe of material possessions. Gods of how many Facebook likes can I get? How many people are on my Twitter feed? I do worship the God of how can I maximize my leisure time? How can I make my cross more comfortable? I think that's a song that Matt Redman wrote a few years ago. While at the same time, we're professing our faith in the Lord. Maybe we're paying homage with our lips, but not with our deeds, with our hearts. And by the way, I count myself very clearly in that category. I'm not trying to preach anything to you that I wouldn't be saying to myself. Now, the passage that Barry read out, this is where it gets interesting, because the first 2.5 chapters of Zephaniah are pretty gloomy, pretty destructive, and pretty mournful. And then suddenly, there's a total change in verse 14, chapter 3, verse 14. He goes from the destruction that's going to happen through to suddenly sing, daughter Zion, shout aloud, Israel, be glad and rejoice with all your heart. And you're thinking, what? Where did that come from then? It's that sudden change that he had. And the Lord talks about gathering them, giving them honor, giving them praise. But see, the thing is with Zephaniah is the first 2.5 chapters are all about judgment, what the Judeans deserve. The last half a chapter, which is only 6 verses, is all about mercy, what they'll actually get. See, God is saying, yes, I know you have forsaken me. I know you've turned from me. I know you're worshipping foreign and false gods, and you will be punished for that, but only for a while. It was 70 years they were punished. They were sent into captivity and exile, and then after that they were brought back. They were punished for 70 years, and after 70 years, the God showed his mercy and brought them back. It's like the... You move it forward, please, David. Oh, sorry, Kevin. Thank you. Put my glasses on. Oh, there's Kevin, thank you. Right, there we are. Here's a couple of quotes from Zephaniah. Zephaniah 3, the Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves. He will take great delight in you. In his love he will no longer rebuke you, but will rejoice over you with singing. Or a similar one in John 3, a well-known phrase, God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Right, so similar passages in a way, and the message of Zephaniah highlights the contrast between what we deserve and what we receive. Despite the people's indifference, despite their negligence, despite their hypocrisy, despite the Lord having just cause to actually send a divine judgment on them, he does something quite different. He sings over them. God came into the world as a humble, insignificant baby, born in a manger. But he brought celebration, he brought restoration, he brought new life, he brought forgiveness for sins. He brought the promise of a future which we can't even comprehend. We deserve judgment, we receive mercy. God knows that we all slip up, we all fail. We all deserve something much, much worse than we will receive. God doesn't give us what we deserve, and for that we should be grateful. So what does all this mean for us? I'm afraid it's turned on here. Can you move it on? Right. Okay. But so often the words of the Old Testament ripple through in the prophecies of the Old Testament, ripple through and have meaning in the New Testament as well, and even right into us where we are now. First of all, for the Israelites, it was a promise that actually things would get better. They were a little bit uncertain what was going to happen. It was a promise that things were going to get better, that they would be restored to their homeland. The coming of Jesus, although not specifically foretold in Zephaniah, clearly it's alluded to that God will save in the future. And the coming of Jesus provided a way for all people, all nations of the world to be reconciled with the Lord. And for us, here and now, We have a way to be reconciled to the Lord. When we place our trust in Jesus, it's that simple. We can have a proper relationship with the Lord when we trust in Jesus. And of course, still to come is the final restoration, when Jesus will come again and everything will be made new. We know that because it tells us that in Revelation 21, there will be a new heaven and a new earth. See, Christ has come and Christ is coming. So I've just got 3 questions for us to consider. Do we need to restore our relationship with God? Is there a mismatch between what we profess with our tongue and how we behave with our actions? Have we perhaps lost our passion for the Lord? Are we running on empty? If your relationship with the Lord is not what you feel it should be, no time to getting it fixed. The time is now to get that sorted. What about our relationships with each other? Christmas can be a really stressful time of year. You can find relations can be thrown together. Perhaps you're living with people you haven't seen for a while. They may be strained. They may have history of various issues but haven't been sorted out. You could have perhaps broken relationships or tired relationships with family or with friends. That's a time now to get them sorted, to get relationships fixed. So that's the second restoration, is with each other. First is with the Lord, second is with each other. And I think the third restoration is one that isn't us. It's not a personal one. It's restoration for the church. The church is losing its voice. For many people, it has no relevance. Look at that statistic from the census in 2021. 25 million people have no religion. Just don't care. They're quite happy going on as they are. And we have the trouble that the church can't speak with one voice. In the world, there are over 45,000 different denominations. We started with one. What happened? So the church needs to be restored. Now, we can't fix that. The Lord can fix that. We can pray. And pray that the church can be restored. But above all, the message you want to take out is from Zephaniah. Zephaniah showed the Judeans is that God loves us despite what we do, and he wants the best for us. And when we put our trust in him, he will save us. Thank you.